Questions or comments on the gentleman from Iowa? Not. Thank the gentleman for being here and for raising the points. Next, we turn to the distinguished gentleman from Arkansas, who is, I believe, chairman of the EOD caucus.
Yes, sir.
We always appreciate the gentleman and the caucus's input on this vital part of our national defense efforts. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry and Ranking Member Smith and distinguished members of the committee. Once again, I'm here to testify before the committee regarding Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD, priorities for the 2018 NDAA. The first priority for the caucus is to re-engage last year's EOD acquisition reform. Last year, Representative Davis submitted an amendment that would have established a permanent joint EOD research, development, and acquisition program under the supervision of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, or AT&L. During conference with the Senate, this reform measure was changed to enable DoD to examine the current program and provide recommendations. The department findings were to leave the current program as it is. This means DoD's oversight of the EOD technology and training program is performed by the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, not the Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L. This is troublesome because the oversight officer's position is scheduled to be eliminated. Additionally, the current system of acquisition causes the services to coordinate on their equipment needs, but then they each have to compete separately through the 4 service requirement systems in order to field what is called joint common equipment. This duplication of efforts results in inefficiency and increased cost to the taxpayer. More importantly, the current acquisition system has completely failed to deliver critical equipment such as X-rays, robots, and electronic jammers to the field. Instead, each service is buying commercial off-the-shelf items to meet its needs. The radiographic imaging system for EOD program is fielding systems that are not compatible with Windows 10 software, are routinely delivered with 50% of the systems broken or unusable, and is so poorly thought out that the Joint EOD Technology Center issued a safety of use message saying that using the system could, under certain threats, cause injury to the user. The Army needs an additional $37.5 million to purchase these commercial systems. This failure to deliver essential equipment that meets requirements on schedule has created a reliance on various commercial solutions that are not joint and will create a logistics nightmare for the Joint Force Commander when deployed. We on the caucus urge the committee to work with your Senate colleagues to develop a real joint EOD RDA program under the appropriate supervision of the Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L, with a funding line managed by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency in order to ensure proper accounting and funding of a small but critical capability and appropriate budget justification documentation to ensure proper oversight. The caucus also continues to be concerned with the capacity of the Army's EOD program. Over the past fiscal year, roughly 1/3 of the Army's EOD force has been cut. Current military deployments to the Middle East have decreased in the past years, but the threat of IEDs are not going away at home or abroad. IEDs remain a cheap, easy-to-assemble, and effective weapon that can have a strategic effect. Many briefings talk about the elimination of chemical or biological weapons, but virtually no mention is made of the EOD men and women who are qualified to disable, defuse, and dismantle these weapons. While working with HASC staff, we noticed very little EOD capacity identified in specific operational plans. We are concerned that the EOD capability is being overlooked in various plans, which will result in a lack of capacity when needed. We recommend limiting the further reduction of Army's EOD forces to match that of other sustainment capabilities. The capacity cuts and lack of EOD planning is caused by a lack of appropriate EOD senior leaders within the Army. Many of the Army's higher headquarters, such as Corps and Army level, have no EOD officer to conduct planning. Additionally, the lack of an EOD general officer continues to hamstring the further development of this important capability within the Army. Therefore, the caucus urges HASC to consider establishing an EOD branch within the Army sustainment community with the Brigadier General as the chief of that branch. We fully understand the difficulty of creating a new general officer position and recommend, as Congress did with other newly created branches, giving the Army a limited exclusion to the general officer cap for the purposes of manning a new branch. Finally, the National Guard civil support teams are the first line of defense for individual states in the instance of a chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear threat. However, EOD technicians are a missing and much-needed element. The caucus recommends the National Guard EOD program, which will authorize full-time national EOD positions, enabling the National Guard to provide 24/7 EOD support to protect our nation. This will allow EOD techs transitioning out of the active components who currently have limited options to transition into the National Guard. Apparently my time has expired, so I will yield and for any questions that you might have.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman raising these points, and obviously full written statement will be made part of the record. The only thing I would mention to the gentleman is we are in the process of reorganizing the AT&L functions, and so we'll want to keep in communication with you on that point.
Thank you.
But I understand the gentleman's point about emphasis in the Army and having the appropriate attention on this, because IEDs are not going away.
Correct.
There's no question
Yes, sir.
about that. And so we have to have that capability with the proper priority.
Thank you.
Any other questions,